Hi guys, Chairman Mo, quick one perhaps. Actually, this is in addition essentially to the video that I posted earlier this week, the day before yesterday, so on the 14th, right? The one about the education of a king. And I finished recording it and I thought, hey, maybe I forgot something, not even that maybe I forgot something, actually that I forgot to add a part on totems and names and that sort of a thing, you know. And it hit me that no, I hadn't forgotten actually. It was important that I speak about the things that I spoke about so that now when I start speaking about this part, then it can make a bit more sense and hopefully go a lot further. I'm not gonna be long. It was triggered by a phone call that I just had with a friend, Uzi Simo, and he was asking me for a favor, and he was asking me for a favor on behalf of somebody else. And so I'm like, no, sure, I can help you, Z. And he's like, no, 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 you're not helping me, you're helping them. And I said, hey, it's funny when you say that. You're reminding me of a video that is long overdue, and it essentially relates to what's this? Um, the existence of my company for that matter, and why a hut, why finance hut, as is famously my company name and slogan and that sort of a thing. I'm just trying to see if I can change my background so that so you guys can see my logo, you know. There we go, finance hut, or the hut part of it. The hut is in gold, right? So why a hut? Look, I'm originally from a village, and if you're from a village, you would know that a hut bears a certain significance. In particular, la kuswa khona ulo umlilo. So there's one that would be a kitchen, and essentially you'd make a fire on the floor, and you'd sit around as a family, and that's where you'd exchange stories traditionally. So when I decided to do something in finance or to start a business in finance, I wanted it to be a business that unpacks um, finance issues, make finance relatable, that sort of a thing. And one of the things that I could personally relate to was the concept of a hut. This place, this intimate place where we can meet and have conversation and essentially expand on topics. And I had this mythological or mythical image in my head of sitting with my grandfather and his father and my uncles and that sort of a thing, and having conversations about where we're from, how, who did what, the brave people in our family, and basically reviving that sense of identity. And so, as the friend is asking me for a favor, I was like, listen, by helping your neighbor, I'm helping you. And I said, let me tell you of something that shocked me when I came to Gauteng for the first time. It was this concept of not having, not being recognized or known as a person. So I would go somewhere and I would tell people my surname before I would tell them my name. And it wouldn't mean anything. And I couldn't understand, how do these people work? Like ninja as abantu, Like I'm telling you now, I remember growing up in town. I mean, growing up back in the day, and I'd be in town with my grandmother or my uncle or something like that. And they would say to you, "Gore, go to this shop, this shop, this shop," and then tell them "Gore, wa ga Magaila," and then they'll tell you where to go or they'll direct you what to do. That sort of a thing. And that just doesn't exist in Gauteng. Interestingly and very proudly, I see it happening a lot with Zulu people. So I'll tell you a story, for example. I remember being late at the airport I had missed my check-in, but I'd missed it by like 5 minutes or something like that. And I'm at the counter. I think it was SAA back in the day. And I get there, I can see the guy is about to go away to help with boarding. I think that's what was happening. And I put my ID on the counter and he grabs it and says, "Hey, my man, you're late. I'm sorry." And then he reads my surname. It's like, Haumtian, umfowethu muswena, uZondo. And at that point, I wasn't really sure like my clan names, nan. I was like, yeah, because I'd heard it once or twice before to Tiani Zondo. I knew there was something there, but you know, I had long forgotten that sort of affiliation or identity card or whatever. And the gentleman legit stopped and said, "Let me help you. Like, you're my brother, Mtia no Zondo, you know?" And I'm sure he could see that I don't know what's going on, but he was very proud that, listen, I'm helping my brother here who's late. Like, this is gonna mean something, you know? And he checked me in, and I thought that is a very peculiar experience. I haven't had that ever, in Gauteng, especially, you know? And I proceeded, went on the plane, and life continued. And obviously, as I knew my clan names, also Kulu, Zondo, that sort of a thing, I remembered that, oh, okay, yes, that is that naming convention that means something, you know? And so that's how that went. A second story is one where I was in a village back in the day, I think about 5 years ago. Kinale, a friend of mine, Rahwa Lepit, you know, Gaskhopo. And it was in the wee hours of the morning, and we took a wrong turn. I think that's what I'll call it. We took a wrong turn and ended up in a situation, largely my fault. Um, I think it was in the AMs, like 2 a.m., 1 a.m., something like that. And we were at a shop, these village shops. So don't think of something conventional. They were closing at the time, and it was the shopkeeper's daughter that was closing, that was locking up. And me being me at that time, I hit on her, you know. Um, but the shopkeeper is getting annoyed because he wants to leave. It's 2 a.m., you know, it's late. He's been working all day. He has to come back probably around 6, 7 a.m., that sort of a thing. And once he had caught wind of what's happening, that how is this guy macking on my daughter, you know, that sort of a thing. I kid you not, this man pulled out the gun and straight up walked up to me and, you know, gun in face. My friends obviously hysterical, trying to calm down the situation. But I remember being at peace. You know, I remember being so calm. And as I'm speaking to this girl, and this guy's got gun in face and is like, "What do you think you're doing?" And my response is not diplomatic at all. My response was straight up, "Well, one day she's also gonna have to get married, so you might as well, you know, accept me or kill me," type of vibe. I don't even know what she looks like, by the way. It was dark, but you know, those hours of the morning, perhaps a bit of intoxication. And mistakenly, or perhaps maybe by divine intervention, he says to me, "Do you know who I am? Kenam Nyepao." You know, this is hundreds of kilometers away from my village. And so I'm like, "Nyepao." I'm like, "Mus, there's a shop in my village with the same surname." This is guns out, and he's fuming. Like he's essentially saying this to let me know that, listen, you've crossed the line. I'm gonna show you who I am. I am Nyepao, you know? And that's his surname. And I'm like, "How? Nyepao, there's a shop like that in my village." And angrily, "Yeah, what village is this?" Then I was like, "No, Manyapie." "Oh, Manyapie." Then I'm like, "Yeah, where in Manyapia are you from?" I don't know why I was so interested with where I'm from, which is actually very interesting, which is the point of today's recording as well, or podcast as well. And I'm like, "Have Malosi, have Malosi, by Malosi's house." And okay, he doesn't know Malos. And then I'm like, "I'm Raila," you know? And so I say my surname, my Pedi surname, like Mwaila. And then it's like, "Is Lord your father?" You know, my late uncle Lord. And I'm like, I just say yes in the convenience of that time, it's 2 a.m. Me trying to clarify that is my uncle, whatever you, it wasn't going to help anything. I kid you not, the moment I said yes, it was as if, that's why I call it divine intervention, because this gentleman put away the gun and was so reverent and apologetic to say, "Oh my God, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to do that." And I thought to myself, what's happening? You know? And he could see the bewilderment in my face. And he was like, "Listen, if it wasn't for your uncle, I wouldn't be here." And I was like, "How so?" And he's like, "No, your uncle was my maths teacher back in the day." This is a grown man. I mean, if I'm hitting on his daughter, you can imagine how old he is. Um, it's like, "No, your uncle was my maths teacher." And he was the first person that I knew that owned a shop. And so over the years, I always took it as, if I study hard, then I can one day become a teacher, then I can one day own a shop. And that's exactly what I did. Um, and for me, it wasn't lost on me. Or so far away, like Vexes Godin, guys, like it was that deep. It was a listen, if this man had killed me here, I don't know how my friends would have even explained to my family where we are and how we got there. But I remember never being scared, first of all. But second of all, I remember being so in awe of that indigenous practice, that indigenous culture of knowing izithakazelo zabantu, knowing who you are, knowing totems, which is another thing that I want to touch on, you know, that in that moment, nothing else saved my life except who I was. I was the lineage Yabo Lord, and there was nothing else that could have saved me in that situation. Like, you know, there was no mitigation. First of all, I was very flippant. I was like, I wasn't apologetic at all for what I was doing, you know. So it really was quite an ephemeral experience. It's guys, sorry. It's that type of a podcast, and especially following on from the one of the education of a king, you know. And I remember very clearly those two stories because they're so rare and lost, you know. We don't do things anymore because, and for especially for one another, because of who your family is to my family and who your grandfather is to my family, that sort of a thing. And those are things that we grew up on, you know. We used to know that, listen, if ever you stranded in Joburg, just speak to this and this and bata wishagabo mama. You know, they'll take you to this so and so's house and they look after you, that sort of a thing. And one of the things that triggered this, I posted a status the other day saying that um, because of my last name, my kid should never have to apply for a job using a CV and a proof of residence. Maybe your kids can do that, but I'm not trying to create that type of legacy. That's not how I'm living, at least, you know. Like working with other men, pushing where you can, guiding one another, hunting together, that sort of a thing. Those are the things that I remember growing up on. I remember growing up in the legacy and shadow of my grandfather's name and knowing that wherever I am, for as long as I knew who I was, I knew gore ke nna Mogaile. I always knew that I'd always be fine. And there was a certain assertiveness that came with that, a certain confidence that came with that. That helped me because I went to boarding schools very young, like grade 4, I was in boarding school, you know. And if you know anything about kids, they're just mean, you know. I didn't used to look anything like this. I used to have like freckles. It was like sunburn situation, like beku bad. And you breaking into a new school where by grade 4, there's already an established hierarchy. There's already the best soccer player. There's already the most popular kid. There's most beautiful kids. There's already the kids that do tennis, swimming, whatnot. And I got there with the arrogance, I have a right to be here. Do you know who I am? You know? And I just competed to the best of my ability. I broke into the football team, and I have no doubt that I probably took somebody's position. Broke into the cricket team, I probably took somebody's position. I learned to swim at that school and probably upset the apple cart. I actually remember very well because at one of the swimming galas, I came second. And I remember it being awkward in the boys' hostel that day because I had taken somebody's position, you know? And look, it was friendly competition, but I think it was so perfect in competition that the apple cart hadn't been upset in years. But I remember going through my primary school phase, never being scared that I wouldn't fit in or I wasn't good enough or that sort of a thing. Just by virtue of I always knew who I was. And for me, that was always enough to give it my best. Like if I have a teacher that's gonna teach me maths, that's gonna teach me whatever, then I was gonna understand it. Why would I not understand it? Like, do you know who I am? My uncle is a maths teacher. My grandfather was a school principal. Like, and it's not even that they sat down and mentored me or tutored me during holidays, that sort of a thing. It was just the pride that I had every time I was anywhere because of the family I was from and the people that I knew in my family, and not even what they had done, because I learned a lot of that later on in life that no, your grandfather had done this, that, your uncles had done this, that, your those sort of things. And so I think that's one of the things that I would add to the education of a king. But it's not so much the education of a king as much as it is opening up the dialogue or the conversation to say what's in a name, which brings me to totems, because I think that's something that has been thrown away completely. Like Babina Kimina Chuen, Babina Tau, Bakwena, those sort of things, identity by animals. And I don't think you guys understand how much power is in that sort of thing. I'll give you an example, right? In So there's a group of surnames that belong to one totem, right? So na ke nna Mina Chuen. I know what you know, that sort of a thing. I think Lebo Ledwaba, if I remember correctly, right? And so what that does is that now if I come to a place like Gauteng where I say ke nna Mogaila and it means nothing, I can then say ke nna Mina Chuen, and that means something, and I'll tell you why. Because Bubaloi, for example, in the Tsonga culture, ke Bukhalanga. Bukhalanga ke dichweni, you know? So now, if you say to me Ubaloi, it means nothing to me. But if you say to me Kalanga Chweni, ke mina Chweni, that means a lot because le nna ke mina Chweni. It means or if we probably go home and sit with my grandfather or great grandfather, he probably would be able to tell us where our families diverged or where our allegiances merged sometime in history. And then we both decided, or it was ordained, that we would identify under the same animal or the same totem, so to speak. And I used to think this is a small deal up until I went to an art fair, which takes me back to the conversation of art in my previous um, podcast, talking about history and the significance of indigenous knowledge and knowing ourselves, where we come from, the fact that writing is the least efficient form of passing on information. I once went to an art fair, and at this art fair, what I did was essentially, it was an African art fair, and I essentially wasn't interested in what's going on because I wasn't too clued up on the mysticism of the painting. And I'll never forget, this gentleman stands next to me. Oh, flip, I I deleted my Twitter. Bongo May was his name. Bongo, if you're seeing this, come on, reach out, dog. Put your number or email or something in my, or subscribe. If you subscribe, then I get to see your email. Um, because I since lost contact with him. He told me where his art fair was, his art gallery was, and I went there and I didn't find him, whatnot, whatever. So he was explaining African art, and he decided to use an example of why African art is so conceptual, mystical, and sometimes goes over people's heads. And he says it's because people haven't made the effort to learn the language of African art. And as we're speaking, I'm looking at my books. I'm looking for this book called Bushman Rock Art Paintings, because I actually one day decided that, listen, this is nonsense that we never wrote our thing. We never wrote our history down. It's just ignored, either for convenience or maybe because, well, if you don't understand something, you just dismiss it. But Bushman rock art paintings are a recording of history. And if you can't interpret them, then you will just call it art. You wouldn't know that this is telling a story of a people at a point in time, you know? Um, and so he starts explaining and he says, so essentially it would talk in animals. It would feature a lot of animal depictions, and as well as maybe color, rhythm, dance, that sort of a thing, because those have meaning. And he said, for example, let me tell you about the monkey. And I sat there and I thought, I wish this guy knew what he's about to tell me, because Naki Mina Chweni, that's my totem, we're monkeys. And that's why you guys have seen I've got a monkey tattoo in my inner sleeve or in my inner arm, that sort of a thing. That's me and my ancestors, proudly so. And so he starts explaining the monkey, and he says, "Do you know that it's only in English literature, especially after the colonial era, that the monkey is a symbol of mischief and craziness?" And I sat there and I thought, no way, you know? And he said, the monkey is actually a symbol of wisdom and communication with the gods. In other words, and he went straight to it. And he said, have you seen Egyptian hieroglyphics? And I was like, yeah, but nobody looks at in detail. We always just look and it's like, oh, nice art. And it's like, that's not art. That's history. That's them telling you the order of things, as well as depicting then whatever messages that they want to depict, that sort of a thing. So he says, if you look at Ra, right, the Egyptian god, and then you look above his head, there's what we call the ibis. So normally there would be an ibis bird or what we call Thor. Thor is a monkey. And if you look, Thor is holding a book. And he says the reason that Thor is sitting above Ra holding a book is so that Ra is always aware that he has to consult in order to pass judgment, which is what the ibis bird does. It also links Ra to the gods, so that whenever he needed to rule or to give instructions, whatever, he could actually access higher knowledge with the gods through a monkey by engaging with Thor, the god of knowledge, the god of wisdom, through engaging with him to get wisdom in order to be able to be a fair and wise ruler. And I sat there and I thought, no way, because I'm about to blow you away, you know? And I kept listening because I don't want to give away my cover and I also don't want to direct the conversation. So essentially, in ancient Egyptian times, if you were put before the thing, not Thor, before Ra to be judged, maybe for a misdemeanor, whatever, then Ra would then take the feather of the ibis bird, and the ibis bird would help him judge or weigh your heart. I think that's other mythology that I'm mixing in, but it's fine. I know a lot of spirituality and entrance into heaven is linked to your heart being as light as a feather, the ibis bird. But I'm not here to teach history. I'm here to talk about identity, name, and what we've thrown away as we complete our education of a king, you know. And so essentially, Ra would rely on the ibis bird and Thor, the monkey, in order to make his judgments and to make sure that I'll just take this call now to make his judgments and make sure that what's this he rules and judges fairly. So Bongo May, so I said to him, okay, you quite learned about these things. And he tells me that no, actually, I don't know if he studied his master's or he was writing an academic paper for something, but up there, in art. And so I was explaining how he basically what he would do. So I was curating then an artwork, so as we're speaking. So he says, already what he would do is that he would study that. That's even why he knew so much about the monkey. So he would study its background and then where it shows up. So he then explains to me that I've actually tracked the monkey to Zambia, to Congo, to Ethiopia, that sort of a thing. And it's got different meanings in those places. And so I asked him, okay, so what does it mean in those places? And he said, ah, look, it's been long since I wrote the paper and I wasn't studying the monkey specifically. I was just studying totems and where they come from and why they had been bastardized or that sort of thing. So with the monkey, for example, because of its significance, because it was advisors to the kings, it was the first to be shot during colonialization or whatever, so that it can be reduced to irrelevance. If someone walks into the room and they introduce themselves as a monkey, we should laugh. We shouldn't take them seriously. But in I'll call it ancient history because some of us can't think beyond 300 years ago, let alone 20 or 15, that sort of a thing. And he said, so colonization worked to bastardize that meaning so that we don't lean so much on it, you know? So he goes on and he tells me in Congo, and if you search, you do the search yourself on the internet, you actually can trace the monkey everywhere. I know even in China, there's this concept called the Monkey King. And even with the Monkey King, they've got a whole big themology about it. Like you don't play with that. It's just I don't want to bastardize it at the moment because of what thing it means and whatnot. And it's very close to me, because that's my totem. That's who I am. So when he's done, I say to him, interestingly, Hamemoraila, which are advisors to the king. And our totem is the monkey. And he nearly fell off his chair and we had a laugh and that sort of a thing. But again, there was another moment where I was in awe of identity, of a lot of the things that we've let go of by virtue of the times. I really don't have anything to say to it. Yes, some of it is abuse, whatever, but yeah, I don't know if I've done before a video talking about how I feel about colonization, that sort of a thing. I did actually one time. The main thing is that I think as much as we were colonized and slavery and what have you, our men let us down. I call it the original betrayal of women. We failed to protect and provide. Simple as that. Then from there, we can talk about what methods of war that were used that were not conventional, that sort of a thing. I'm not English, I'm not white, I'm not whatever. I don't subscribe to those beliefs. So as a result, for me, it just reads as we failed to protect our women and children. And yeah, until I work on it, or until it makes sense in another way. So that was that. So then I said to him, would you be able to commission an artwork that I don't have to explain, but when somebody walks in, they can just see it and know that, listen, this family stands for this. And he said, sure, that's something I'd be able to do, exchange numbers, which I then since lost. And yeah, the rest is what it is. So that's the relevance of totems. The other one is, I know Credo Mutwa. Those of you that know Credo Mutwa, in his book, Indaba My Children, Credo Mutwa was a historian, a Sonuzi, they say a shaman, an African traditional healer. And he clarifies that he actually is a historical a historian. He's not a healer. You know, you get so the concept of isangoma actually means a profession. So today I'd say I'm an accountant, there'd be a lawyer, there'd be a historian, that sort of a thing. Yeah, I don't want to delve into it again, not my expertise. And so he says that he is a historian. And he says now when we talk about totems, one of the things that breaks his heart is how Africans have been depicted as non-lovers of animals and these heartless, non-compassionate people, right? And he says he'll tell you a story about farm murders and why you would get these massacres that would happen. And he explains the story of a meerkat or a wild cat, I think, which happens to be the totem of a specific group of people. And he speaks about how brutal slavery was, that they came and they killed anything and everyone. And then they would then put you in servitude after having raped your women and that sort of a thing, right? And so one day it happened that this farmer had kept ill treating his employee, obviously, right? And the employee was subdued, very humble, very thing. You know, you'd get beaten up and then you just do your work. Up until I think a meerkat came on the farm. And obviously, the farmer sent the employee to go kill it to protect its crops, whatever. The employee would not dare, you know. And then the farmer fetched his rifle and then shot the meerkat. Oh, ladies and gentlemen, I too a hell was unleashed on him. You know, they say this farmer turned around and slaughtered this man, then slaughtered his wife, his kids, everything. You know, or this man slaughtered the farmer. It was brutal, it was gruesome, you know. And the court case was obviously then tried as a farmer, I mean, an employee kills farmer, farm murder, you name it, that sort of a thing. And nobody ever investigated it, right? As he's a Sanuzo, he's a shaman, he then followed up on what was the sequence of events. And even in the court records, the gentleman explained that this guy killed the cat, you know, a mere cat, but he would mention it in passing or like not as a main argument, so to speak, né? And so it seemed as if it was just a retaliation for the servitude, what have you, up until Credo Mutua came to unlock this person's story. And so it turns out that no, this man was very well educated in who he was and what the meerkat symbolized in his family. And so, for thousands and thousands of generations and ancestors and people and heroes and heroines that had come before him, they had lived under the meerkat. And so it had come to symbolize his ancestors. Like if I go into a place and I see monkeys, I'm immediately at ease, you know? I'm immediately relaxed because I understand that I'm probably welcome there, you know? My ancestors go before me or they come before me. And so if you kill a monkey, you have a very special place in my heart where I would not readily accept you. So it was the case with this gentleman. And so when he saw a meerkat, this man saw it as a sign from his ancestors that they were here to tell him something, you know? And when this farmer then killed this meerkat, to this guy, it wasn't killing the cat or killing a predator or an invasive species. To this guy, it was putting the final perspective into the head of this gentleman that the same way I brutalize you, I'm even willing to erase your entire history, thousands of years of very, very strong men that conducted themselves well. I can wipe you guys out just like that. And this gentleman had a sense of duty to immediately avenge his entire lineage. And that's how important totems are. That's how important animals are. I remember, and this is a last story because I think by now you get the point when it comes to totems. I remember Usponki, one of our friends, Nube, I think is her surname, Xhosa lady, dated my friend. So that's how we were friends. Um, so she explains one day that, oh, actually, I can't kill a bee and I'm allergic to bees. And the reason I can't kill a bee is because I'd be killing my ancestors. When she said that, I immediately thought, snap, I've heard this before. And this is it. And it would be hysterical. We'd be on lunch as friends, whatever, and a bee would like inevitably come to your drink. And she would be hysterical because she's allergic, but she would be so gentle because that's her ancestors. So she can't hit the bee away. So she essentially has to communicate with it in such a way that she chases it away without obviously getting stung and then yeah, and then whatever complications happen, but obviously prevents the rest of us from killing the bee. And Charamuto explains that, if we were to reopen that indigenous knowledge and that affirmation again and unbastardize who we were and our totems, we would actually get to see that we don't merely love animals and keep them as pets, you know? We actually worship animals. We actually go as far as to revere them. And that's why, even, for example, in the Zulu culture, in Gomo, if you see guys in the Zulu culture that raise cows, how much they interact and how much they revere those beasts. Like they can talk to them, they can make them do things. Like go watch videos on YouTube, and there's no way you can watch that and say to me that African people don't love animals or African people don't care for animals. Not only do they care for animals, but their identity is actually in those animals. Now, if you add that to the education of a king, that I shared with you the previous podcast. And you then understand, if you have an energy with nature, a oneness with nature that enables you to be able to coexist, you would then understand how powerful you are. Like the ability to share an environment with a lion and not kill it because you'd be killing somebody's ancestors, or you'd be killing a significant identity card of somebody, you know. KwaZulu, if you are the queen, Mandlovu, you know, it's always in animals. Unkosi ibizwa ngebubesi, those sort of things. Mina myself, siungwekazi. So when I see the leopard, I understand that that is my identity. And again, now when we globalize it and when you start to see how important this thing identity goes, if you go to the East, animals still have meaning. So things like the monkey, the tiger, um, follow, there's a lady, the Nechitukas, apparently to her, the totem is a dragon. And we've always wondered, but we've never had dragons in Africa, or where do we even get dragons from? That sort of a thing. But if you go to China, it has a very strong significance and a strong meaning and says a lot about who you are and who your family is. And those are the sort of things that, again, when we talk about names, naming conventions, identity, and tapping into who we are, that is one of the things that then naturally starts to flow once we've had that education of a king coming into being, and then actually practicing and acting it out. We talk a lot about what's this? About decolonizing education, living in your era, unity, that sort of a thing. You might find that if we do a lot of this homework, we actually don't need to hype ourselves up to be united. We actually don't need to convince one another to be on the same page. The minute I say, Ore, I'm Leserisha Mtiane, I'm Moraila, I'm a monkey, Ngwegazi, I'm a leopard, what have you. All the leopards, as I was watching, it was South Africa versus the DRC, and they called them the leopards. And I had a very strong affinity with them and affiliation with that throughout the game. I was even starting to get conflicted, or, I want us to win. But every time the commentators would say the leopards, I would get caught up, or, ooh, you know, then these guys are my brothers. They shouldn't be losing to South Africa, you know. that sort of a thing. And yeah, I think you get my point by now that there is quite a bit that is easily accessible that we can get to. And I would love to see an environment or a situation in which we go back to recognizing one another and seeing one another and actually reviving stories about interactions between the monkey and the leopards, between, the Zondos and them Tetwas. I mean, one of the things that they did very well in Shaka Zulu was to actually dig the history back um, of Shaka Zulu with Ilembe, Shaka Ilembe, was actually to do that. And as they say, on set, it was a spiritual environment because of the ancestors that were rightfully invoked. That is not just the movie, that was an invocation of a people that came before us. And we often think that 100 years or 5 generations is a long time ago. And that's because that's what mainstream would like to have us believe. It's easy to quote Aristotle and Socrates, but the minute you want to quote your great grandfather, it's almost as if you're worshiping ancestors and that sort of a thing. And I don't want to get into the politics of it, but I just want to show from an identity perspective how much we've lost and how much we give away and we've given away. And we'll continue to give away for as long as we don't know ourselves. You go to a department and we talk about the service being bad, and I'm thinking there, perhaps it's not a service problem. Perhaps it's an identity problem. We don't see each other in each other anymore. We don't see even ourselves in the context of who we represent in some of the positions that we're in. You'll be going to a department and they'll say, go there, Lindiwe will help you. Lindiwe is a name. Lindiwe is one standard deviation of who you are, versus if they said to you, Umabuthelezi uzokusiza lapho. Buthelezi have got a very strong affinity in my family, o Olo, Opengu, the Shezis, that sort of a thing, on Tombela. If I get to a department and they say Mantombela will help you there, that has a certain resonance for me and my family. And even you as you're working, if you're working there as a Ntombela versus working there as a Tabo or Ntabiseng or whatever, it adds a lot more pride and a lot more dignity as to who you represent in that chair. I'm telling you now, if I'm in any village in Limpopo, I'm not misbehaving again. And that's because I understand whose surname and whose name I carry. And the fact that they may have done a good work 20, 30 years ago in that same village, that is probably allowing me to be welcome and accommodated there. That's Chairman Mo. The recording was a little longer than I had hoped it was going to be, but every sentence, every word worth it, because I wish we could tap into that as Africans. I am building an asset management company for exactly that. I don't want to give away too much, but Finance Hard, one of the things that we do and will do is instead of opening an account when we manage your assets in your name, we would open it either in your clan name or in your family name. And that way, if 20, 30, 40, 50 years down the line, if a Khadebe comes and asks for a job and we are managing Khadebe money, irrespective of where in the family tree they are, they would immediately get our assistance because the Khadebes would have helped us on this journey, that sort of a thing. I'm very much still a staunch believer in that system of seeing people in the entirety of their community and who they are and actually enjoying that dividend. And that's that for me. I'm Chairman Mo. I hope that added value for you. Let me know in the comment sections what are some of your totems, what are your clan names. Zithini izithakazelo zenu. I would want to acknowledge you that way, and I would want that when you meet me one day, you actually address me according to who I am, and not just via name, but also via family background, family identity, that sort of a thing. Many great men have come before me and put me where I am. I'm not here because I'm smart or privileged or connected, that sort of a thing. I'm here because a lot of groundwork was done generations before I even was born. We talk a lot about generational wealth. This recording and the education of a king is now the official record of what I'm talking about when I talk about generational wealth. I'm talking about wealth at a totem level. I'm talking about you being able to go into another country altogether: Malawi, Zambia, Tanzania, West Africa, Guinea Bissau, Morocco, Mali, Chad, Niger, Cameroon, Senegal, Tunisia, Algeria, Djibouti, Eritrea, Botswana, Zimbabwe, Mozambique, Angola. You know, you go to all of the African countries, the DRC, Rwanda, Burundi, you name them, all 54 countries. Yes, I do know them. As I'm saying them, I actually can see their lights going off where this country is, you know. And you go there, and all you need to do is give your, what's this? Give your totem or give your family name, and then doors should open, you know. You should get your rightful place in that society, at least just so that you can have a head to put your pillow on or a pillow to put your head on, and to have a warm meal and continue on your journey wherever you're going. I know if you go east to Asia, China, Thailand, those places, you will have a home because they still very much keep their culture and traditions and indigenous knowledges alive. I know if you do go to South America, the tiger still has meaning, a lot of meaning there, as well as I think the monkey as well. I'm not sure about the other totems. It's your job to go and find out about yours. There are very few, contrary to popular belief, there are very few places on earth where you can go and the animal that represents your totem doesn't open doors for you. And that way you don't have to be a stranger on this planet. You don't have to be a stranger on this continent. Again, I'm Chairman Mo, ngavalelisi kaningi, ba re ko kgopela marobalo go laela gantši. It's to ask for a hospitality le boroko and a place to put my head if I say goodbye a lot of times. Cheers.